Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shaniley Show. It has been a little while since I did that intro just because with the Get Ready With Me chats, the AX Get Ready With Me chats, and the vlog, I just forgot to do it. I think I forgot to do it. I'm not sure at this point, but it feels like it's been a while since I've done that intro. This video is my review, my commentary on Anime Expo 2023. I had a pretty good time this year, as I mentioned in the Get Ready With Me chats video and my vlog. I think I mentioned in my vlog I had a pretty good time this year. I don't want to say that it's hard to find fault with Anime Expo this year because there were quite a few faults with it. I just didn't experience the faults firsthand personally. I was seeing a lot of it like secondhand. This is something I talked about a little bit in my vlog, and I have a video planned for it around Anime Expo next year. Something that I have found with having a relatively good experience at Anime Expo is learning how to work the Anime Expo system or break the AX system. And as I said, I do have a video planned for it next year around Anime Expo, so I'm not going to talk about this too much. Basically, you want to avoid the big name areas, the big money grabber areas. Those would be the exhibit hall, the artist alley, and the entertainment hall. I call those the big name areas, the money grabber areas, because one, those three areas are the most promoted areas for Anime Expo specifically. Those are the big name things, and because they're so widely promoted on Anime Expo social media, those are the things that people gravitate to. As a result, they're also the big money spenders and the big money makers for vendors and Anime Expo. Because at the end of the day, you're spending a lot of money, and by the end of the convention, by the end of that 4-day period, so much money has been spent at these areas. And Anime Expo gets a cut from each of the booths there. So Anime Expo is making a ton of money from this. If you go all 4 days, there is a very good chance that you're spending a little bit of money each day, maybe around $100 each day. So if you go all 4 days, you're spending close to $400. So that's why I call it the big money makers, the big money spenders. And there is a way to kind of avoid that, and I talked about this in my vlog a little bit, and avoiding it basically means going to do other things during Anime Expo or around Anime Expo during the time that those things open. So for Anime Expo, it's usually around 10 a.m. when they start letting people into the entertainment hall and exhibit hall and artist alley. So like avoiding those places like within the first hour and a half to 2 hours, it's not really going to disperse the crowds in any way, shape, or form in the halls themselves, in the exhibit hall and the artist alley and the entertainment hall. It's not going to disperse those crowds in those areas. But if you have people going to do other things, if you're going to do other things within that 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. noon window, if you're going to do panels and workshops and going to anime screenings, or maybe not getting there super early, then you're kind of helping to ease the crowd that's entering those areas, which ultimately does help out in the long run. And that really helped me too, not going into those areas first thing. But moving on, because as I said, I do have a video planned to talk more in depth about that. I do think that Anime Expo could have handled it better and should have handled it better. They had a bit of an excuse last year, given that it was the first year after COVID, but this year they didn't have an excuse to not handle the crowds well. There are so many ways, even without like people actively going to do other stuff within that first hour or two of things being open, there are ways that Anime Expo staff and volunteers can kind of manage it. For example, this is just random numbers, but like let's say they let 100 people in every 10 minutes for the first 30 minutes of it being open. So between 10 and 10:30, they let 100 people in every 10 minutes. So by 10:30, they let 300 people in to start walking around, and then that would kind of encourage people to go do other stuff, because it's like if you're in the back of the crowd and you're thinking, oh, I have to wait half an hour, I may as well go do something else, you know? And then maybe like 10:30 to 11, you let 300 people in every 15 minutes. So it's like things like that to like allow for some crowd control and also easing up the crowd at the same time. As a lot of videos, especially on TikTok, mentioned, if you have like a swarm of, if you have a like yeah, a swarm works. A swarm of people going through the doors of the exhibit hall or the artist alley or entertainment hall, then that can pose a serious fire hazard and health hazard and safety hazard, and can cause a lot of injuries if, one, people aren't being aware, and two, staff and volunteers aren't handling the crowds well. So it could go very badly, and they could definitely manage things better. But again, I had a pretty good experience because I managed to avoid the crowds for the most part. Yeah, I was in crowds for quite a bit of it, and there was really no place this year that was crowd free, except if you went to like the safe area by one of the info booths. There was no real space that was crowd free. There was always people around. Thankfully, I managed to avoid some of the heavy crowds where you were shoulder to shoulder because I was going to panels right at 10 a.m. and I was doing panels between 10 and 11:30ish, and then usually I would sit down to eat afterwards, and then I would go do my shopping. So I was actively avoiding a lot of crowds. I think a lot of the exhibitors were really good. I did have a really good time this year, and a lot of the panels were really interesting and really fun to go to. I couldn't do much recording at the panels because most of them were no photos, no recording. I did take photos and like a couple of clips of the panels before they actually started, so that's why you saw some of that in my vlog. And for the most part, the staff was really nice, and I had a lot of good interactions with them, so I think that was a positive. I do think that Anime Expo this year could have gone better, because I think what happens at Anime Expo is that it's almost like the staff and volunteers either go into the new Anime Expo forgetting how the previous year went, if they were staff and volunteer the previous year, or they're going in almost blind to what happened the previous year. Like this year, for example, yes, there were improvements from last year, but at the same time, crowds were terrible. Very little was being done to take care of the crowds and to manage the crowds and to make like clear walkways for people who weren't necessarily standing in the crowds but just needed to go sit down or go to the bathroom or get away from the crowds. Like absolutely nothing was being done about the crowds. And also too, it's almost like kind of contrary to what I was just saying about going in blind. The staff and volunteers do adapt to the situation day by day. So by day 3 and by day 4, it was a lot better than the first 2 days in how they managed things. But at the same time, looking at the crowds were not managed very well. They don't necessarily take that information of what they learned each individual day. They don't take that into the next year, like what they did last year, like some of the little things they did last year, Anime Expo 2022. They didn't bring that into Anime Expo 2023. And I'm assuming that they're not going to take some of the stuff that they've learned from Anime Expo 2023. They're not going to take that into Anime Expo 2024. I would absolutely hope that they do, and I am hoping they do, but at the same time, I am not expecting that, and I'm assuming that they won't, just based on the comparison between 2022 and 2023. I do think I am going to still continue attending Anime Expo, and I'm still going to continue getting the 4-day badge, kind of like how I approached it this year. I'm not going to force myself to go all 4 days, but the 4-day badge does give a little bit of leniency in choosing what days I go. Speaking of badges, the prices were insane this year. Like, I know so many people who were talking about the price of the badge and were so upset by it. It started off at $145, finished off around $185. That's not including any fees, shipping, taxes, etc. That's insane. Like, taking a step back from what the prices were, it's not that pricey like in comparison to like some other things, but at the same time, it's like looking at it through the lens of having attended Anime Expo for 10 years now. $145 for a 4-day badge at the start of registration when they first open up registration is insane. If it had been $100 and then at most $115-ish, fine. But having it be basically $150 and then close to $160-ish, including all the fees that they tack on, the shipping fees, handling fees, the fee that you have to do because you're paying with a card usually, etc., and so on and so forth, like all the fees that they tack on, it gets it's close to $160. And then they raised the price a little bit later, a couple months later, in like March or April, to $165. And you're bumping that up about $10-ish because of all the fees. So it would end up being like $10, $170. And then the very last price before they finally decided to cap it was $185, and that's basically $200, including all the fees, which is insane. I'm not surprised, because when I was talking about it with some friends, like, and I brought up the fact that I thought it was because they had lost some money on Anime Expo Chibi, they were like, yeah, we hadn't even heard about Anime Expo Chibi until like last week. I don't think Anime Expo Chibi did poorly by Anime Expo standards. I don't think it did as well as they were hoping. It didn't do very well by Anime Expo standards, like the normal Los Angeles Anime Expo standards. So I think they were trying to make up for any monetary loss there. So that also makes me kind of surprised, but at the same time not surprised that they're holding Anime Expo Chibi again. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be in Ontario, California again, which is kind of stupid. If you're looking at a map, Los Angeles versus Ontario. Los Angeles, let's say, is over here. It's in the west area. Ontario is basically practically due east from Los Angeles, maybe like 2 hours. And if you were having it like Northern California or in another state, fine. But we're kind of Anime Expo'd out for the rest of the year if we're talking about like general like Los Angeles and surrounding areas, which includes Ontario. And I think most people from Ontario are just coming to Anime Expo, so why are we holding an Anime Expo Chibi in Ontario? I'm not surprised that they're doing Anime Expo Chibi, because it's another money funnel for them. It's another way for them to make some more money and make some more profits off of any booths that they have there. But at the same time, I am surprised, because like no one knows. I just know about Anime Expo Chibi. I've known about it because I follow Anime Expo on Instagram. Practically no one knows about Anime Expo Chibi. So it's like, why? Have it in another state. Anyway, I think that's all I kind of want to say in this video and can say in this video. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my merchandise haul video next week.